I'm Shan Shan. I'm the introducer for the next magnificent keynote speaker, Derrick Broze. Who knows who he is? Oh, everybody knows him. And I saw some people have his bestseller book. What's the book's name?
How to opt out of the technocratic state.
Yes. One of them. And I saw you reading another one. What's the other one?
Conscious Resistance.
That's right. I do not even need to introduce him. You guys all know him. He is an investigative journalist, filmmaker, author, and activist. And then the two underground bestseller book. And he is also the founder of the Freedom Cell Network and the People's Reset Movement, formerly known as the Greater Reset. So with that, I want to welcome Derrick to the stage and then share with you guys about how to exiting the matrix and building a better model. Welcome.
Cool. Thank you for that intro. I have this water here. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I think they gave me an hour and a half, so we're gonna try to go deep and answer some questions and maybe do a couple of songs. So thanks for being here. Like I said, I know there's a lot going on. This is my first time here at Conscious Life, and wow, it's really cool. There's a lot happening. You could be in about 30 other rooms right now if you wanted to be. So thank you for choosing to spend some time and space with me. The title I think I sent in is Exiting the Matrix, Building a Better Model. I know a few of you raised your hands saying you know my work. Has anybody heard me speak before? One here? Cool, awesome. Because I think that I wrote my notes on a receipt I just found in my backpack. So I think that my presentations and speeches are maybe potentially more important than some of the other work I do because they're extremely and exclusively focused on solutions. And I'm going to be sharing some more of my background for those who don't know. But yeah, I mean, the gist of it is that my work, my journalism, my activism, my human beingness is all about trying to promote solutions. It doesn't seem like there's too many people here focused on problems, maybe more kind of curious and fascinated and excited about life and the mysteries and all the things out there. But I will speak to what I see are some of the limitations of the spiritual or sometimes New Age, if you prefer, community, and why I think that community, this community, like many of the communities in the broader truth, freedom, awakening, whatever you want to say, space out there, both online and in person, that there are different traps and limitations that sometimes people fall into, which prevent them, in my belief, from finding real solutions, where just as one brief example, the rabbit hole becomes conspiratainment, and it's no longer about actually trying to change the world or improve it or better it. It's just, okay, I don't watch mainstream movies and TV, but all I do is watch conspiracy podcasts all the time. And I don't do anything in my real life, and I don't actually try to improve it in any ways. So I think that's a big problem. That's one of the problems I'm going to point to. And then I will talk about the strategy that I call Exit and Build. I will share a bit about the Freedom Cell Network and about the People's Reset movement. Is anybody familiar with the People's Reset? No, Brad is. A couple of you, awesome. So I'll tell you more about that. We actually just had it last week, and we're fresh off that. So it's another really big event, not as massive as this yet, but definitely, I think, similarly aligned people who are all trying to answer the questions of how do we improve and better the world. And then finally, I will talk about the eco-village that myself and my partner Miriam are building, the Conscious Agora, which is based in central Mexico. And that's where we're going to wrap things up and then probably do some questions. We'll see where this goes. So, as I said, I'm an activist, I'm a journalist, and I've been doing this for 15 going on 16 years now, which is kind of crazy because I never, went to high school and in college thinking I'm going to become an activist and then I'll go to journalism school. I really took, I think, a non-traditional path as far as these things go. I started out by going to prison at 20 years old. That was my life path, my career path. And it's actually that experience that fundamentally changed and altered the rest of my life, and I think is why I'm here right now connecting with you guys. Because when I was 20 going on 21, I got addicted to crystal meth. I was from Houston, Texas, so I was in Houston and got locked up the week before I turned 21. Really had no idea what was going on. I was kind of at a lost point in my life. But it was through this experience, which was very difficult, and I ended up spending about a year behind bars, the first charge, and then between 2005 to 2008, went back and forth and did about 19 months in Texas state institutions before I finally got out of there, and I was a felon, and I was kind of coming back into the world with this totally new experience. And it's in that space when I'm locked up and I'm searching for answers and trying to figure out how the heck did I get here, and where am I headed, and all these important questions, that I started to meditate. I started to pray. I got into like my spirituality, basically, which I'd been extremely closed off to prior to being locked up. Then when I got locked up and, like I said, was just basically faced with the reality. I don't know if you guys have ever really felt powerless, like truly powerless. I don't mean kind of like a deep emotional pain or sadness or frustration. Even with those things, we can find ways to distract ourselves. We can go on the internet, we can hang out with other people, we can drink our problems away, we can do all kinds of things out here in this free world, so-called, to distract ourselves. But when you're in prison or jail or some situation where you can't leave, and it's the four walls that you have here, and you can no longer decide when you get to leave or when you get to eat, and all these different life choices are taken away from you and a lot more imposed on you. In that space of truly feeling powerless, I was able to really dig deep and find my power, and that's when I really started to do a lot of my healing work, and just like I said, going inside and meditating and praying. I was grateful to have a very big spiritual influence in my life through my grandma, both my grandmothers. But one of my grandmas started sending me books on prayer and on Zen Buddhism and things of this, and so it allowed me to kind of find that peace even within prison and start doing some of that healing work and looking, and I could see this kind of line going back a couple generations of my family, where I'd grown up visiting my father in prison for his drug addiction, and he had his own trauma, and I just could see this intergenerational trauma, and I really made a choice that I'm not going to follow that path. I'm not going to follow that family tradition. So that's really where my awakening began. Before I ever really even knew anything about conspiracies or government corruption or asking the bigger questions. I mean, generally speaking, I don't think I trusted any of the things I was being told, because as a young kid, I remember being elementary, and I was the weird one at the library checking out books on UFOs and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all kinds of stuff like that. I also watched the X-Files as a young kid, so I was definitely very much like, okay, the truth is out there, the government lies, stuff like that. But I didn't know anything deeper than that. So when I got locked up and I had this first awakening on a spiritual level, when I got out, as I said, I was now a felon. And so I'm in the city of Houston in Texas. I'm a felon. I can't get a job certain places. I can't get rented certain places. But I was also the happiest I'd ever been, because I'd just gone through this transformation. I think I probably felt happy for the first time at 23 years old, and just was really starting the beginning of a journey that continues today, to uncover that trauma and all those wounds and heal. And so, yeah, I got out, and I'm a felon. I am trying to find jobs. I'm having to go to the library every day because I'm applying for jobs. I didn't have, my own computers or phones or anything at that time. This is about 2008 going into 2009. And at the library, I read a library book all about the drug war, which I had just got out of prison for. And it really that was the first thing that kind of opened the door of this isn't the version of history, relating to the drug war that I was taught in high school or college or anywhere else. It was a really cool book just about the sociological and scientific and cultural impact of cannabis, and then the legal impact as well, and the history of the drug laws in America that are largely based around racism and money and trying to drive the hemp business out of business. And so that was just wow, okay, if this is some information I've never heard before, what else is out there? And it was just in that space that I think was just intended for me to go through that really hard time, coming out, feeling joy for the first time, experiencing some pretty low lows as a felon, and with facing a lot of obstacles, but also just with this joy and this excitement for what life could hold now. And in that space, I just started diving down the rabbit hole. I read, after that experience, I started reading certain books, watching certain documentaries. I heard Ron Paul speak in Houston around that time. This would have been 2010 or so. And within a week or two, my whole brain was cracked open and my entire world was changed. You guys know the feeling, I'm sure. And that was the beginning of my journey and my activism. And so I share all that to say that for the first couple years of my activism, I was doing the traditional activist things, going out, protesting, marches, rallies, documentary screenings, just passing out flyers, doing all the important kind of physical world stuff. And at the same time, I was continuing my spiritual journey after getting out of prison. So I started having this sort of double life where I had meditation circles and consciousness groups I was involved in, and we would do all of our activities. And then I had activist friends, and we would go do activist things. But every time I tried to bridge that gap, or like say like I invite one of my activist friends, like, hey, would you guys like to come with me? There's a conscious rave tonight, or there's a med mob or something. And they're like, what are you talking about, you crazy hippie? Like, just some weird sort of like, a lot of the activists I met at the time were atheists for one reason or another. Nothing against atheists, but they seemed to kind of lack an interest in the world beyond the five senses, let's say. But then at the same time, when I would be at my meditation circles and consciousness groups and we're doing our thing, and I'd say, hey guys, did you hear about this latest police shooting or this crazy government thing going on? They'd say, don't talk about it. You're gonna bring bad vibes, only good vibes here. Don't talk about the negative things, which I also do not believe. I believe in the power of prayer and meditation, but I don't think the solution is to stick our heads in the sand and say that some unknown entity, be that aliens or otherwise, are going to come save the day, so we should do nothing. I think that's a big problem within this broader community. And so for the first couple years, I was like, all right, I got my activist friends and I got my spiritual friends. But then in 2013, after a couple years of really kind of doing that journey, I think I was listening to a speech from David Icke or something. It was one of those nights, though, when you're like up all night just watching YouTube videos and you can't stop. And in that space, the words, the phrase, the conscious resistance was whispered to me. And that's when I launched my website, which has now been around for about 11 years, called The Conscious Resistance. It's also the name of my book trilogy. And more specifically for me, that phrase, that term, the conscious resistance, it means the understanding, the reflection, the realization that the struggle for a more free, ethical, and just world are not going to come from only confronting the physical institutions of power. So by that I mean, by let's fight against the government, let's get rid of the corporations. Those are all important, but I think most people in this audience also understand there's a spiritual element to everything going on, right? Outside of this room, there's a lot of people who got one side of that thing, but maybe the other. Now, the problem more likely to run in this room or in this space is that people understand that there's a spiritual element and they try to ignore the physical element of it. They're only meditating, they're only prayer, they're only connecting to their light beings and angels, etc., and completely floating off physical 3D world and foundation all day long. And I think both of those are sort of problematic, to be too extreme in one of those areas. So for me, the conscious resistance is really the bringing together of those two realities, understanding that we do need to create change in the physical realm as well as ourselves, starting here. But there are things in the physical world that could be improved and that hopefully we want to improve. And at the same time, there's also this internal world, which I often term our internal tyrant, which is your own doubts, fears, insecurities, and limiting beliefs, which can hold you back and prevent you from being the best person that you're capable of being. And then I think that we all probably need right now. We probably all need the best version of ourselves to be able to make it through some of the things we're facing and get through the other side as whole, conscious people. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what the conscious resistance is. So as I said, my website's theconsciousresistance.com. When I first launched it, it was really just a place for me to share my thoughts outside of the activist group that I had started. I was starting to kind of, I talk a lot, and I was like, I need to have a space where I can just share my own ideas. But after a while, it evolved to be what we call the Conscious Resistance Network. And so you can download all my books on there. You can find my documentaries, podcasts, interviews on a wide range of topics that I've covered over the last 11 years, including everything from UFOs and aliens and meditation to my investigative journalism, which I do take very seriously, and that I, have worked very hard at building a reputation as a journalist and independent investigative journalist who doesn't promote hyperbole and sensationalism, which I think is another problem in the independent media out there, that space, I think everybody should have a voice, but there are a lot of people who say anything in the world that doesn't necessarily have any foundation in reality. Again, maybe a problem within this community, but people listen and people eat it up. For me, though, I pride myself on having articles, documentaries, books, etc., where you can see all my transcripts, all my resources, everything that I do. And if you're interested in that side of my work, because we're not going to focus on that, but if you are interested, I have a 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power, and on Monday we're releasing the 16th episode. It's at thepyramidofpower.net. So you can watch all first 15 episodes and then the 16th one on Monday for free. I try to put as much of my content out there as free because it's meant to get out there and reach people. So just particularly on the Pyramid of Power, if you are a person who is well-researched, some of the information might not be new to you, at least until you get to the later chapters, but it is a tool that I created for you and for everybody out there to use as a way to wake up your friends and family. If you struggle to reach them by starting at 100 with your explanations of the world, and you want a way to kind of try to reach them at a ground level, the Pyramid of Power, every episode is aimed to be. We've succeeded for the most part, but the idea was episodes that are in 30 minutes or less, and that take the best information that's out there, including books and documentaries, as well as my own research on topics like the education system, the corporate media, big tech, going progressively deeper as we get up this pyramid. And then at the end of every episode ends with solutions and suggested reading and documentaries if you want to go deeper. So, like I said, most of the episodes are 30 minutes or under, and I specifically made it in mind with how do we reach the Netflix generation and make this bingeable for somebody who gets sucked into episode 1 and 2 and 3, and then before you know it, their entire life's changed 4 hours later if they watch it all the way through. So yeah, we're almost done with it, and you can find it at thepyramidofpower.net. So that's, relates to a lot of the journalism and things I do, but eventually in my activism and after creating the Conscious Resistance, and I'll talk more about the Freedom Cell Network and the People's Reset in a bit, I started to recognize that, as I continue to see today, that way too many people are concerned about only the problems going on in our world, or as I said a few moments ago, kind of lost in this, there's something in our brain, at least maybe those of us here, or I'll speak for myself, there's something in my brain that excites me about digging and researching. That's why I find myself as an investigative journalist, but conspiracies, right? It tickles a certain part of our brain to and it's important to understand this, because if you want to understand your psychology and be stronger than that, you need to be aware of it. So I can find myself when I'm like, oh, somebody just shared something with me that tickles a certain part of my brain. I could spend 5 hours going down that rabbit hole, or I could get something productive done, or I could do both. There's time for both as long as you are able to manage your time. But I recognize that I can see, okay, this is a story about, let's just say, an important politician or a well-known politician. And there's a rumor connecting them to this other shady person, let's say Jeffrey Epstein. Something along those lines, right? And it's a thread, and it's if you pull it, there might be something there, might be nothing, but it's it gets us curious and excited, oh, I gotta know what's on the other side of that door. And then we make podcasts about it, we write articles, we talk all about it, and it can be a fun thought experiment, and sometimes it does lead to greater truths, which is obviously what we're all after, right? The search for truth. But often, if not most of the time, this isn't a call to say don't research, don't question things, but just to be more aware, because often those searches don't end up anywhere. There's no end to the rabbit hole. You ever had that feeling? You just keep going, you're just damn, I have no idea what's going on now. I thought I knew something before that last rabbit hole, but now I'm totally lost. and like I said, it's fun, it's exciting, but my point here is that I think it's important for all of us as consumers, and I speak for myself, of articles, content, videos, podcasts, whatever you consume, documentaries, that having that conversation with yourself after a while, what am I getting out of this? I enjoy coming home and relaxing after working or doing different things and sitting down and watching a podcast that asks interesting questions and makes me think and question the world. But at the end of that day, at the end of the week, do you have anything to show for it? Maybe you have a little bit more knowledge, like I said, maybe some more confusion. But I think it's important that these conversations and these efforts to search for truth actually are tied to real world consequences. And that's what I try to focus on, is because I just see with my colleagues and friends out there that are doing good work, that are so exclusively focused on the problems or the sort of fun search for truth that it becomes disconnected from the day-to-day reality. In a way, I think that's also why maybe conspiracy culture, truthers, activists of this sort, freedom community, liberty community, whatever you want to say, health freedom, sometimes struggle to reach new people, because we can become so insular and we're just kind of focused on the fun search for truth, but it's disconnected from maybe the average person's reality who's I'm just trying to feed my kids today, or I'm just trying to make it through the week. So what does your weird conspiracy have to do with my reality? Not to say it doesn't connect to the reality, but I hope I'm making my point that sometimes the search for truth in itself, I think, can become a trap. I actually wrote about this in the Conscious Resistance trilogy. The chapter is called The Rabbit Hole Trap. You can find a version of it on theconsciousresistance.com. But I want to focus on solutions. So that's what we're here today. But before we do that, I'm going to share a song. This is going to be an a cappella one. We'll do the other one at the end, brother. He gave me the idea of well, I heard you make music. You want to do one of your songs? And I hadn't thought about that. Sometimes we do it, but we got an awesome recording. We got cool people here. Why not perform some of it, right? But this one's going to be just a cappella. And I started making, I don't really like to call it conscious hip hop because I feel like that's even like a box, What if I want to write something that's unconscious? I don't know. But making music that for me is just an extension of my activism, trying to get people to think. And it's also about my journey that I shared with you guys earlier, going from dealing drugs and being lost in that and going through crazy things, going to prison and then turning my life around. And so I put out an album a couple years ago called Transmutation. I perform under the name 33. You can find my music at 33ishere.com. And this song is the last song on the album. It's called Awakening, so I'll just share one of the verses with you guys. I've never felt more powerful than when I question the power, full of themselves, lost in arrogance, but in reality, the cowards. If you're searching for the devil, look no further than your government. The politicians are the puppets, but don't forget the false covenants. False prophets, mega churches making profits, the devil's loving it. They lie to your face, and you take it. Do you prefer to be ruled? Wolves in cheap clothing, they've got you fooled. They pull the wool over your eyes, feed your lies while they strategize and propagandize. Come on, my brothers and sisters. This is our moment to rise. They never saw us coming, but we are the antidote to their lies. We strive for truth and liberty. We strive to be better. Humanity's made mistakes. We're not perfect, but this ain't forever. I know we're destined to build the better world we know is possible. It's gonna take struggle and making ourselves responsible for our choices and actions. We have the power to manifest that which we know we deserve. We are humanity at its best. Might as well just mix it all together. The music and the ideas, right? It's all one and the same. So, yeah, I touched on my spiritual journey here. We're going to focus now on the solutions. The title is Exiting the Matrix, Building a Better Model. And I think that maybe this crowd, like I tend to speak at a lot of different events, and some of them are crowds that already sort of get the spiritual side of the message, so I can leave out some of that part of the talk. I feel like that's likely this crowd. I'll touch on a few things there, because then sometimes I'm speaking to crowds that they get maybe more of the activist side of things that I'm discussing, but don't really see the spiritual side, so I emphasize that. Today we're going to touch on a bit of those, but we're going to try to ground it as much in the physical 3D world as well. So as I was searching through the conscious resistance, doing journalism, doing activism, I eventually came upon the ideas of a man named Samuel Edward Konkin III. He was an activist, originally from Canada, lived in the US, and he died in 2004. And he was part of the 1960s, 70s student movements, which were really active in the US, Canada, really around the world. But he was super active in that movement, and he started to look for solutions. What do we do about political corruption? And in the late 60s, early 70s, he could already see that from his view, politics wasn't the answer, that politics wasn't going to be able to save the world or save the people or lead us to freedom. At best, he thought, you could maybe kind of get some scraps from the table, let's say, and piecemeal fix things, but while the larger machine progressively got worse and moved towards tyranny in the long term. And so he rejected the idea of political action. He also rejected the idea of violence, that he didn't think violence was moral or even a winning strategy, that, even if you got everybody with all the guns in the world and all the weapons in the world and tried to storm the Capitol or whatever, they're going to drone bomb you. You were outnumbered. You were already outgunned, etc. So he thought violence was immoral and ineffective. So he eliminated both those options, like voting, politics, violence. What else is he left with? Most people would say, then we're just apathetic. We're nihilistic, right? Who cares? Just give up. Right. Just try to, black-pilled, as they say these days, right? But he also rejected that. He didn't think that, that it was a good idea, and I tend to follow that. I think that, in fact, every single one of us right here, no matter what country you're born in and what language you speak and what your color of skin or background, etc., that each of us have ancestors that went through blood, sweat, and tears to get us here in this moment, breathing, living, existing. And that for us who consider ourselves conscious and awake, who see the many problems in the world, to say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything about them. I'm just going to leave it to the next generation, or I'm just going to trust that somebody else is going to save the day for me. There's the white hats out there. I don't need to actually do anything or whatever. To do that is to sell out your ancestors who had to go through all that to get you here in this present moment. But not only that, I believe, as I think Konkin did, that you're also selling out the coming generations, the people who aren't even born yet. But, in our indigenous communities, we talk about the 7th generation principle, and the idea being that we should live in a way that is going to benefit and empower not only those of us here who are living and existing, but the generations after us, your children, their children, et cetera, all the way up to the 7 generations and beyond. And I do apply that both forwards and backwards. Like I said, our ancestors going back 7 generations and beyond who had to do all sorts of struggles and hard work to get us here in this moment. And then those who are not even born yet, not even a seed of a thought of an idea yet, but are 100% dependent on us. The world that they are born into is going to, largely depend on the actions that we take or do not take. We can see the sort of bad looming potentials out there, and we have our theories about why they're happening or who's in charge and this and that. But at the end of the day, we can see the world is not working in a way many of us believe it should. And so to know that, even if we disagree on the details, but to know that and do nothing, I think is a failure on both fronts there, right? So if you reject apathy, if you reject politics and violence as an effective way to achieve a better society, then what else are you left with? Samuel Konkin believed that the answer was what he called counter-economics. His philosophy was called agorism. It comes from the Greek word agora for the marketplace. And essentially he thought that if we could remove the corporate state out of the way as much as possible, take them out of our interpersonal relationships, and focus on building counter-institutions outside of their control, that over time, this generational change, because real change won't happen overnight, it won't happen with a vote, it won't happen with just electing a president and all of a sudden your whole responsibility is over. That's the lie that we've been sold, that through violence or through force or through voting and government, we can somehow make our way to freedom. In reality, it changes, it grows person to person, heart by heart, mind to mind, and generations. So that's sometimes, I think, difficult for people to accept because we want change as immediately as possible, right? We want to see it now, and especially in our digital age of instant gratification, it's hard for some people to accept that they might work on a goal and not even see the outcomes of it in their lifetime. Like, that's pretty hard to think, oh, wow, I'm going to work on this goal, and I don't know if I'm actually ever going to get there by the time I expire from here, but the next generations will be better off for my efforts, and they'll pick it up and continue on, right? That's hard for some people because we want to see it right now. So I think that's the way that real change happens, and Konkin did as well. And so he thought if we were to start pulling out our financial, moral, and I would think emotional and spiritual support away from this matrix system and focus on the creation of parallel alternative systems outside of the control of the current grid, that over time, as they become weakened, because not only financially, economically, the Federal Reserve System, central banking, it's all unsustainable anyways. It will collapse at some point. They're going to continue to try to prop it up. But the more those of us who are forward-thinking and exit from those systems and build these counter-institutions, then we could eventually create something else. Not necessarily like, now we're the government and we're in charge, but the idea could generally be summed up as, instead of competing within the system, compete with the system itself. Compete directly with it, right? So, and he wrote a couple of books about this before he passed away. His name's Samuel Konkin Edward III. You can find his work out there. But my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which we do have the books here today, is largely inspired by some of his ideas. And as I said, he died in 2004. And many of the things he predicted, namely that technology would play a role in helping people start to exit from these systems, as well as make those systems more and more invasive, have come true. He didn't live to see them. And so when I first learned about his ideas in about 2012, 2013, it really made sense with my life and my path, because as I shared with you guys my journey of getting out of prison, getting into activism, I was one of the few lucky ones that by the time it was the point in my life where I should be filing as an adult, no longer as a dependent under my mother after I got out of prison and stuff, filing with that 3-letter agency in the U.S., I woke up, and so I just never talked to them. And I continue to not talk to them. And so I didn't get into the systems in certain ways that maybe others have. So it sort of just naturally worked with what I was already like, oh, his ideas are about staying outside the system. I'm kind of already doing that. And so I've just dove further and further into that idea. And a little bit more specifically about his ideas, it was that if we could start with the economy by avoiding talking to the IRS when possible, by using cash when possible, by avoiding sales tax and all the different taxes when possible. So let's say like you go to a local farmer's market, or you're buying some fruits and veg from somebody at the stand on the street. For the most part, it may be different here in California, for the most part though, you're not paying taxes on those transactions, just two people voluntarily transacting and engaging with each other. And his idea was like, why should there be government involved in that? And not only is it immoral, but they have no place in that relationship. So he did focus largely on economics, and I tried to take the idea, and I've taken the idea further and applied a more holistic view to it, which is that if you take that idea of, okay, his counter-economy, which is what he called the counter-economic system, by using the black and gray markets, basically, again, avoiding taxes, avoiding regulations and fees, and taking as much of our energy away from that. Because I don't know if you guys are aware, but every single tax dollar that you are extorted for, involuntarily, I'm sure, much of it, a large portion of it, an increasing budget of it, goes towards bombing people in other countries. Currently, we could say Gaza and other places like that, right? So for me, those are things that are immoral that I don't really like to support. So I think you have a moral argument and other arguments to try to avoid those things when possible. So I take that idea further, though, and say, okay, well, what if we looked at our food system? We looked at our education system. The healthcare system is obviously something many people have started to question in the last few years. And taking your time, money, and energy away from those systems where possible, and creating and or supporting those who are able to create new alternative systems to that. And you guys may have seen this over the last few years. There's been people who've been trying to create sort of alternative new private charter jets to avoid having to deal with things like the TSA or vaccine requirements or mask requirements at the airport, stuff like that. There have been people who, actually I have a friend here at the event right now who unfortunately is giving a talk at the same time as me right now. And his name's Hakeem Anwar. I encourage you to look him up. His company's called The Above Phone. And we've been working together for years. He's also, we've worked together for a long time. And his company Above, they make Deagle privacy phones and laptops based on Linux, and they have privacy emails and other things. And the point is, he's somebody who's looking at the technological world and saying, hey, here's a problem. How can I help people exit from that system and support better companies? But you're not going to find those kind of companies when you go to the local electronics store. You're going to see Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, the people who've already dominated and monopolized the market, right? So the idea, though, of Konkin, I take it holistically, and I call it exit and build. We're exiting from systems which are not in line with our values, for one, but also which in the long term will not lead to more liberty and privacy. In fact, will lead to slavery in the long term, technotronic slavery. I tend to call these systems just slavery systems. So exit and build is about looking at not only the economic system, and you say, well, I don't want my tax dollars to go to funding killing kids in other countries or funding all kinds of crazy things that we're learning about. And I also don't want to support the Federal Reserve fractional reserve banking system. So when I can, I'm going to use alternative currencies. And when I can, I'm going to try to use cash. Like there's a step and a progress in this effort of exit and build. Like, for example, let's stick with the economic example. So corrupted Federal Reserve, central bank, fiat debt-based system, tax dollars going to fund war, fund surveillance, banks like JP Morgan Chase that worked with Jeffrey Epstein, like that's the financial system, right? So maybe we want to try to avoid that in whatever ways we can. And one step would say, okay, I'm going to use cash where I can so that my transactions aren't tracked as much by the credit cards and things like that, and eventually CBDCs or stable coins. That's a step in the right direction, right? But at the same time, you're still using their money. You're still using the Federal Reserve System and all the things associated with that. So then, and you're also maybe still holding it in the bank, like a JP Morgan Chase Bank, Bank of America, the same banks that robbed the American people in 2008 and time again. Why would we want to support them? So then you move your money out of that and you put it into a local credit union. You're familiar with credit union, you tend to have more control. You actually are like kind of more of a member where sometimes you can vote on how they use your money in the community and things like that. Still, technically part of the fractional reserve debt-based system, but at least now you're not supporting JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. You've taken a step away from that system. And that's kind of how I view this, and whether you're talking about education, food, money, health, technology, like I was saying with my friend, your state of mind. Also, we have to exit from unsustainable and limiting belief systems and mindsets and build better ones, right? Is this making sense? Yeah. Making sense? So it's not a start here where you are today and then be out of the system totally free if that's what you choose by tomorrow. This is a process, and it does take time. And also, we're all going to have different destinations. What I'm describing to you, the way I personally live my life, is not easy, and I do write about it in my book, some of the limitations and the drawbacks of being a felon with no tax history, with no bank history, with no check slips to show. As far as they're concerned, I really don't exist in their world too much. I mean, I have a passport so I can travel, but try to go get a house, try to go rent, like you get a million questions that I personally can't answer, and then you throw felon on top of that, and it's even more difficult. And it's been 20 years since the felony, but still, trust me, everybody still judges you for it. So I'm not saying that this is like easy, but for me personally, in an attempt to live more in line with my values and to avoid and be outside of what I call the technocratic state, which is clearly coming into view. And if you haven't become aware of this ideology of the philosophy of technocracy, I do encourage you to go watch some of my documentaries, which you can see for free. Also, as I mentioned, my books are for sale here, but you can download the entire thing for free. It's at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. The book is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, and it goes much deeper than I'm going to go today. There's also a free audiobook on there. It's available in English, Spanish, French, and German. So the information's there if you want to go deeper, but I want to share a few more examples, and we're going to talk about the Freedom Cell Network, People's Reset, and then my land project called the Conscious Agora. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yep. And how am I on time? Because I want to make sure if there's any questions. I think I'm good, right? I got 40 minutes, something like that. Cool.
Yeah, you have until you have 40 minutes.
Awesome, thank you. Cool. So, exit and build. Would you guys like a few more examples of exit and build? I mean, I was mainly focused on the economic side, but I can go into some other areas if that'll be useful. So let's continue with the technological one. Like I said, my buddy Hakeem, he has a company. He's trying to like this is his specialty. I'm not a technologist. I'm not a software developer. I'm not a coder. I'm totally out of my depth when it comes to that stuff. But I use my platform to say, hey, friends, or anybody who pays attention to me, here's somebody focused on solutions in this area. That's what I do a lot. That's like through traveling and doing events like this and networking, meeting other people. I try to use my platform and as a journalist to interview people who and say, hey guys, look, this person's working on the solution for food, for healthcare, for educating the children outside of the brainwashing, etc., and providing examples to that. And so Hakeem fits perfectly into the tech side of that. So tech side, what are the problems associated with that? And you can feel free to shout out here. What are some of the issues associated with our beautiful digital world that we're moving into more and more every day?
Security.
Surveillance is the obvious one. Somebody said security. AI. Right, so I think we generally understand like it's related to privacy, and in the bigger picture, it's related to freedom. Like, because if they can use the social credit scores and the AI and the facial recognition cameras and all these things combined, they can start to socially engineer our lives like we saw them starting to during COVID, and they don't have to put a gun to your head. They just make it very difficult to be a free person, or you lose all your privileges, you know? So that's what they want. But I want to make this clear too. I'm not here like doomsaying and trying to say like all is lost, like they're going to win automatically or make that assumption. But I also, as I expressed earlier, don't think it's a wise strategy to just sit on your hands and expect that insert name is coming to save you. Political person, white hat, type of ETs, whatever you want to say. That's just my view. Feel how you like about it. But I think it's more wise, even if you did believe that, to say, okay, well, that may be true. Maybe the ETs are coming to save me, or Christ, or Buddha, or Q, or somebody else. But in the meantime, I'm going to take steps to make my life more free in the ways I can and make myself less dependent on the system, just in case maybe it turns out I'm being fooled by a massive psyop. That you actually have something going on in your own life, right? And more importantly, that we're working with other people to do it, because I don't think we can do this on our own. Like I definitely have a lot of ideas, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a technologist. I don't have all the other pieces of the puzzle. So even if I was a complete loner, I have to work with other people in the interest of my own self-preservation and in the future. And so I think that can be another challenge. I mentioned I was going to drop some different challenges that I think that our broader communities are facing. I think this is another one, is sometimes getting in our own little cliques, in our own bubbles, whether that's on the internet or in person, and sort of like, I can't work with that type of person because they believe X, Y, or Z. And again, there's obviously limitations. Like, there are some people I definitely don't want to hang out and work with. But if we have a different theory about who shot JFK, or whether or not we landed on the moon, or whether or not disclosure is real, or Project Bluebeam or something, whatever those things, let's have those dialogues and those debates and discussions. But in the interest of, again, the bigger picture, perhaps we need to learn to work with other people who have differences of opinion. Even people who we might consider not awake, right? And just a real quick aside on that, I've tried everything you can think of under the sun in my efforts as an activist. I'm an anarchist, I'm an apolitical person, but I even ran for mayor of Houston 2 times, in 2019 and 2023, in the effort to reach people. Because by doing so, by filling out some paperwork and paying a little bit of money, I got access to radio, to TV, to high schools, and to old folks' homes, and to rich neighborhoods, and poor neighborhoods, and white neighborhoods, and black neighborhoods, and Democrat groups, and Republican groups. Just by being, oh, you're Derrick Broze, candidate for mayor? Come on in, let me show you around. And I took full advantage of that to spread the message and the ideas that I care about, and in the bigger picture to try to pull some of those normie people into my other work and maybe help them see some of the other things going on in the world. But I'll tell you this, I met a lot of good people through there who we probably wouldn't consider awake in this crowd. If we asked them a few questions about COVID and some other things, they'd be like, oh my God, this is a total sheep. Who is this person? But they're in the community working harder than anybody else here. Okay, they're not awake, but they're actually involved in their community. Like, this is another big thing I've seen a limitation just in the broader freedom space, and especially, again, I'll say with my colleagues, people who like to be on stage or do podcasts and stuff. They might have some good ideas and good communicator of those ideas, but their only activism is through the internet. They have no local connection to their own. Like if you were to go around their neighborhood, town, or city and ask people if they know about them and the good works they've been doing, they'd say, who? I never heard of them. We never see them out here. Oh, there's somebody on the internet. Okay, cool. They've got millions of followers all based all around the world and no connection to their local community. I've tried to do the exact opposite. When I was in Houston and even where we live in Mexico now, very much involved like in the local community. I think that's important. So then when I did decide to go do this crazy experiment of running for mayor, people actually knew who I was and remembered, hey, this guy was warning about vaccines before COVID. This guy was talking about this stuff at 5G back in 2018. This guy's been trying to get fluoride out of the water since 2012. Things like that, right? So I say that to say, again, we need to be active in the physical world, I believe, and we have to work together with other people to make it happen. None of us can do it alone. And I met a lot of great people, and even when I recognize, all right, if I start talking about this topic, we're going to no longer be able to work together. But if we focus on this area right here that we seem to have a common interest, we can get some cool stuff done. And maybe I'll put aside those areas of difference right now, and maybe with time, it'll come up and we can have a healthy discussion like, hey man, have you ever thought about this thing? Instead of me being like, I need to force my view on this person, and if they don't agree exactly like me, then screw them, I can't work with them, right? I think that's a big limitation, and it's not going to get us very far. So I do try to work with people even whenever we completely disagree on things, and I try to focus and orient my actions towards the real world. But how many people are coming from communities where you would say, wherever home is, whether it's here locally or going back somewhere, that you don't feel like you know any other like minds in your area? Like you feel alone or isolated? Got a couple hands back here? First of all, guys, hopefully coming to a place like this, you recognize you're not alone. Like even when you're back home and you go back to day, whatever that is, I know what that feels. Like I said, we just did our event, had hundreds of people coming from around the world and crying their eyes out about how powerful an experience it was, and almost sad that they have to go back to their day-to-day reality, you know? And like that sucks to know somebody's feeling that way. But it's important just in those moments, think of these experiences and just like, all right, you know, I feel alone here locally, and that might not even be true. We'll talk about that in a second. That might not even be true, but we can feel that way. And just remember that there are so many people around the world that are asking these questions and working on these same solutions. We had the amazing blessing in the last 6 months of doing the People's Reset, our event that we usually hold in Mexico, in the UK back in September, and then we got to go do some events in North Wales and in Denmark. And you know, rooms full of people where they're already in Denmark, they're already dealing with digital IDs. They've already got, like, you can't get insurance, open a bank account, go on public transportation, do most of things without having this digital ID thing. It's not mandatory, but try to exist without it. And you know, so even in that space, rooms full of people asking the hard questions, trying to think, how are we going to stay free? What is our plan for the next generation? So freedom lives everywhere, and there are people like us everywhere in all of our different situations trying to answer these questions. So just hold on to that and remember that. And if you do feel like you're struggling for local like-minded community, and more specifically, local like-minded community who want to take action, because it's one thing to be a part of any number of activist groups or meetups or online clubs that get together once a week or once a month and have a nice dinner and talk about all the problems and the conspiracies. But from month to month to month, is anything changing? Are you doing anything? You know, how many people have been part of those activist groups? Like you just meet up and get together, and again, there's cool people there, good conversations, but there's nothing happening. And after a while, people stop coming. People, like, you know, either just life happens or there's just nothing to pull them back because it's just a meetup, it's just a talking club, it's just and that's not to say that to totally crap on that, because I think that it is important to have those spaces. If you feel alone 90% of the week when you're at work and you're like, oh my God, I can't talk about anything, I really think I can't express my true opinions, and you finally get around like-minded people, it's like the dam opens up and everybody just wants to talk all night. And like, I get it, I see it, I understand it. But after a while, it's like, what are we doing? Are we just getting together to commiserate on how awake we are? And everybody's so stupid and they're all such sheep and they can't see the world we see. We're so superior, look at us, we're so enlightened. Sometimes it turns into that. So that's another trap we can fall into. But if you're looking for a community who are like-minded and who are action-oriented, I want to talk for a moment about the Freedom Cell Network. And there's a website, but more importantly, there's a movement, I think, out there. And I'm really trying to put my effort back into promoting this idea. When you've been promoting something for going on a decade, and you see these ebbs and flows, these highs and lows, like where there's times where this concept, whether people call it freedom cells or any other name, is really, like, people are feeling the need for it and the importance of it. And then there's other times where it just seems like there's no interest. People are just like, yeah, but we just got Trump in office. Why do I need to take care of myself? Everything's fine, right? The world's better, right? Elon, billionaires, everybody, we're all good. And when you're consistent the way I try to be, you see this happen. So let me give you an example. Back in 2016, when I first started promoting this idea of freedom cells, which I heard about from a friend back in Texas, his name's John Bush. He gave a presentation in 2015, and he was talking about what he called the Central Texas Mutual Aid Society. And it was basically just this idea of, what if we got together in our local communities and you find 5 to 10 people who are like-minded. Again, doesn't mean you have to agree on every topic out there, but you're generally like-minded, you're solutions-oriented, and you guys sit together and say, what are our main goals? Everybody here expressed like they understand surveillance, so maybe you start with, hey, I want to be more private. So maybe your freedom cell or your mutual aid group, you decide, whenever we communicate with each other about our meetings or our goals, let's use this encrypted messenger. Not because you're committing any crimes, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you just want to flex your privacy muscle and say, hey, might as well practice it, put our principles in action. So then your local club, your mutual aid group, your freedom cell starts meeting on session. I don't personally use Signal because it requires a phone number, but and also assume all of these things can be hacked and broken. So if you really need to communicate something privately, do it face-to-face with no computers or phones in the room. But at least practice it. Use things like session, use things like status, and others that exist out there to communicate. Then you guys set some goals and say, hey, you know what? All of us here are interested in learning more about growing our own food, but none of us know where to start. So then you set some goals for each other. And you say, okay, this next weekend, we're going to go as a group and visit the local farmers market. I'm just going to see what's out there, see what's selling in our local area. Maybe ask some questions of the farmers that are there. Oh, we talked to one of them and they say, we do farm tours. So then your group decides like, hey, let's set up a community group farm tour. Go learn about the farms that are within 20 miles of our area. Doesn't mean you need to be a farmer. Doesn't mean you need to that's the rest of your life. But you're getting closer to your food supply. You're getting more awareness of it. And I don't know if you guys had the same issues that many of us did during COVID, where grocery stores and places like that, the big box stores that most of us are dependent on, started requiring masks, then started requiring vaccines in some cases. That's a great example of why you don't want to be dependent on those systems. Also, we also saw that they can very easily break supply chains and disrupt your access to food at a moment's notice. They can call it because of COVID or anything else, but they can disrupt the supply chains. We could go on and on about the problems of why you don't want to be dependent on that system. Not only that, unsustainable, wasteful, filled with pesticides, GMOs, etc. And then why not get as local as possible? So we know the problems, but you want to focus on, as a group, our goal is to get closer to our food supply. So you do a community farm tour. Maybe you guys learn that there's a CSA, a community-supported agriculture in your area, where you guys can all chip in and get weekly boxes of fresh organic produce that's grown 20 miles from your house, right? You're starting to set goals as a group. So it's a freedom cell is a local mutual aid group focused on decentralization, localization, nonviolence, apolitical. Like I said, we don't believe politics is a solution. We don't believe violence is a solution. And completely solutions-oriented. But what each cell or mutual aid group, or I've heard people call them hives, hubs, pods, circles, whatever, what each group is going to look like, the outcome of it is going to be completely different, right? Even say from LA to San Francisco, the groups are going to look different based on the interest, the environment, the goals, the people involved. And that's sort of where this beautiful decentralized nature comes in, because I heard about it in Austin, Texas. I went back to Houston, where I'm originally from, started the first Houston Freedom Cell, started meeting with a few friends, and everything I just described is what we did. We started going to local farmers markets, started going to community gardens, started learning a little bit about some encryption tools. We did everything from knot tying to Spanish lessons and just all kinds of skills that we each wanted to learn. And the general idea is that this isn't just, as I said, another activist group where you just get around and talk. These are your more action-oriented, focused, like-minded people who you're not preparing for doomsday. It's not like a doom, like a prepping group or something like that, although there could be some similarities if that's your interest. But it's about creating that local independent community. And so as I'm doing it in Houston, and they're doing it in Austin, and people are doing it here in LA, then as it starts to grow, and it's happening in India and Australia and elsewhere, the idea is that over time, these groups get more and more networked, right? So you have we started with one freedom cell in Houston. Houston's a big spread out city, so over time we start to realize, hey, some of us are coming from the north side every other week for these meetings. Why don't we create the North Houston Freedom Cell? We'll meet on a weekly basis, then on a monthly basis, all the local groups get together for a big meetup. We have a potluck or something. We discuss, hey, what are you guys working on? Hey, what are you guys working on? Let's share ideas. Let's share resources and skills. I've seen this idea in action. Like I said, I've been promoting this in 2016, and I talked about the ebbs and flows. The first couple years, I was getting invites on podcasts. I was doing it in Houston. It was starting to okay, people are hearing about this idea. But it took COVID-1984, what I call the gift that never stops giving, to really get this idea to rocket into existence. So the website's freedomcells.org, freedom, cells.org. And I'll explain that real quick, because some people are like, cells, oh my God, I don't want to be in a prison cell. This is a psyop. You guys must be CIA agents. I've heard it all. But I'll just tell you guys a part of where that name comes from. The way I've always interpreted it is that each cell or group or hub or circle or whatever, again, the name, call it what you like, is independent, is beautiful and unique and powerful on its own, but also like the cells in our body, each of them performing all these individual tasks and kind of running on their own, but then collectively they're a part of this larger organism that is us. And I kind of see each of the groups like that. Like you got a group here. They're all separate. They don't even know each other exist for the most part. But over time, as we get more organized, and I believe that's started to happen, we are a part of this larger network. And this goes back to my original idea about the solutions being to build parallel systems. I believe the freedom cells, the hubs, whatever you want to call them, are starting to lay the foundation for what will in the long term become trade routes, will become alternative food production systems and food distribution systems. Like, it's a big vision and it will take time, but I do believe that's what's starting to happen. And it's happening out of necessity because, as I mentioned, COVID-1984 came around, and all of a sudden a lot of people realized, oh my God, maybe I do need to know my neighbors. Maybe I do need to have like-minded people around me. But then when they started telling them, don't gather in groups of more than 5 or 10 or whatever the crazy rules they were coming up with, people were using our website to find each other. So the main thing is freedomcells.org. It looks like a social network. I encourage you to read like the front page and everything and learn more. And it acts like it, but it's not intended to be. The main reason for it existing is to help people find others. Like I said earlier, for people who feel like alone or you don't know any like-minded people, the idea is you go to freedomcells.org, you create a free account, put what your interests are, what your skills are. We have spaces for that. And the reason for that is so that people can search. You can search like, let me go to the member map. Help me find people who are interested in permaculture in 20 miles where I live, right? We don't encourage you to use your home address. We're not asking for your home address, but maybe put the park near where you're at or something like that. We don't even ask for your real name or real email, but because some people get stuck on there like, oh my God, it's a psyop to give them all our addresses and they're going to show up at our houses. And sometimes we let our paranoia go wild, and that allows you to not take any action. Because you're like, you could think of a million bad things that, what if this thing could happen and this thing could happen, and meanwhile you're doing nothing, right? And they've already won. So don't use your home address, put a park nearby, search and say, yeah, show me all the people who are interested in fermenting or just whatever the different things you might be interested in. And it'll show you the people there. Then you can go to their profiles and check them out. Hey, this person looks cool. Oh my God, they're literally within 5 minutes of me. Let me message them. And then, so we have the member map and the cell map that show me all the groups within 10 miles, 20 miles, etc. So back to the ebbs and flows. Pre-COVID, there was scattered groups here and there around. We saw some people really taking the idea off in Australia, mainly during COVID, because you guys might remember, Australia was one of the worst places in the world. And so there was very active freedom cells out there where literally, I think it was Melbourne, where the governor or the mayor out there, he had what they called the iron ring around the city. And they like literally locked down everything. And these guys, this Melbourne freedom cell, were sneaking past the checkpoint and going and like hiking and camping out in the hills or whatever outside the city and doing like, not prepping, but just like primitive skills, you could say, and camping, but also just like getting the heck out. And it was sort of a way of them to protest of like, hey, we can get past this barrier even when they're trying to totally lock us down. But it allowed them to find people when they weren't able to go out. And so when Miriam and I, we did a tour in the middle of COVID in spring 2021 in the US and in Mexico, spring and in fall. And basically everywhere we traveled in the US, people were coming to the event to find like-minded people, and we heard every single day, I used Freedom Cells to find people during lockdown. I didn't know anybody, I looked on the Freedom Cell map and I found people. People started meeting each other, they started organizing groups. These are like illegal groups that aren't supposed to be meeting, they're meeting in somebody's backyard in secret. What a freaking crazy time. And some of them are starting to homeschool their kids together. Some of them started to like grow food together. Some of them bought land together and are, really building, like going big for it. Others just found people to help them feel less crazy, which is an important thing too, to have that sort of social and spiritual component of it. And so the website went from 1,000 or so people, 1,500 at most, I think, pre-COVID, to now 40,000, 41,000, something like that people. But again, we hit this stagnation because COVID started showing out and everybody's like, oh, okay, we don't need solutions anymore. I'll just go back to doing the usual thing I was doing. It's not like these same problems still exist and are still on the horizon and happening. I'll just deal with that later. we're a silly species that often doesn't act until we feel pressured or threatened. And I've seen that time and time again, and I'm kind of done trying to fight human nature. I'm just going to support and help and collaborate with those who can see what's coming ahead, and more importantly, understand that we have the power to write what comes ahead, right? Because it's like I said, if you see a train wreck coming up ahead, and you're like, yeah, I know that's there, I'll deal with that one day. Right now, I'm just trying to get everything I can out of life and have a good time and just take care of my little family. But one day, I'll deal with that. Eventually, it's going to be there. You could be proactive. You could be forward-thinking and say, rather than just sitting here on this train headed straight towards disaster, I'm going to figure out, is there another track out there? Is there another path I could, pursue? So again, back to being forward-thinking, proactive. Freedom cells were a big part of that. I'm sad to say that since things have, quote-unquote, calmed down, less people are active on it. I will also say, is anybody on the Telegram app by chance? So if you're on Telegram and you search Freedom Cell Network or Freedom Cell Directory, we actually have this directory that is probably out of date, but we try to keep up as much as possible because a lot of people were very active on Telegram during COVID. So some people use the website and some people use Telegram. Some do both. Like, for example, somebody might create Los Angeles Freedom Cell and kind of plant that flag on the map on the website, and then they'll also say in the description, hey, we're very active on Telegram too, join us over here. Ultimately, the whole goal of the website is not to just stay on the website, and it's not a place to post memes or cat pictures or anything like that. It literally just exists to help people find each other. Once you found your group, or there's a local meetup, leave the website behind. Keep your profile on there. Other people might find you, but the goal is to help you find people in the real world and connect in person and focus on that. And the cool thing is, over the last few years, as I've been, especially during COVID, as I've been promoting this idea around the world, I've got to meet other people who are doing similar things. There's something called the Freedom Network in the UK. There's also, they had the Stand in the Park movement, which was literally just saying like, hey, we're not allowed to do anything. Just go meet up at this park and whoever's around, meet there. And that just sparked a lot of connection for them. There's also Fractals. There's a few others out there that it's like we all kind of got the idea around the same time of like decentralized, local, small groups meeting up in the interest of larger groups forming in the bigger picture. So you have like your individual cell connecting to the regional cells, and it continues to grow. We're not interested in trying to evolve it more than that. We do try to keep it very loose. That's why some groups look completely different from each other, because again, it's going to be based on your resources, your interest, your location, the people involved, etc. But the idea still exists, and it's still out there, and I encourage you to look into it and spread it if you know people who are looking for like-minded people, because I have heard lots and lots of success stories through it. And that's very cool to kind of see this idea in 2015, be inspired by it, start doing it in Houston, and then spreading it as much as possible, and then seeing it work for other people. It's a very humbling feeling. So I'm grateful that we've had that. And the Freedom Cell Network, that idea, myself and my friend John, the people who founded this, that evolved into the next couple of things I'm going to mention as we wrap up here. Because again, my talk's about exiting this matrix, building a better model. So these last two things I want to mention about that are the People's Reset and the Conscious Agora. So COVID times, the Freedom Cell Network's growing, summer 2020, a lot of fear, a lot of panic, lockdowns are happening, we knew the vaccines were on the way, just there's all that, take yourself back to that mindset and that time. And myself and colleagues, we could feel and see and read the palpable fear in the air. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a lot of fear and a lot of paranoia going on the internet at that time, for good reason. Like people, we're just watching the world go freaking crazy. And we just started thinking, like, what can we do to provide some real hope? Not false hopium and trust this politician or sit and wait for somebody else to save the day, but what are the sort of tools and ideas we can share with people to help give them something to actually do? And so part of that was everything I'm sharing today, the Exit Build idea, the Freedom Cell Network. And so what we decided to do, well, one other important thing, you guys might remember summer 2020, the World Economic Forum announces the Great Reset, this idea, right? They first put out that video. This is where people start hearing the phrase, you will own nothing and be happy, this sort of thing. And again, lots of fear in the air. We knew that the World Economic Forum was going to be meeting January 2021. That's when they were going to unveil the full, what is the Great Reset plan? So a lot of us are just like, oh my God, what's happening? We decided, the Freedom Cell Network, what would happen if we just hosted our own 5-day event and talked about very similar ideas to the World Economic Forum, but instead of this sort of top-down, technocratic, centrally planned worldview, we talk about it from a bottom-up, grassroots perspective. And so in late 2020, we launched what was originally called the Greater Reset and is now called the People's Reset. The website's thegreaterreset.org, thepeoplesreset.org. It goes the same place. And so every January since 2021, we've been meeting and in Mexico at first we had the live event in Texas and a live event in Mexico. Now it happens every January in Morelia, Mexico, where Miriam and I live. And it's a 5-day event, completely solutions focused. And the first one, we did it on the exact same days as Davos. Now we're kind of like less and less focused on them, but that was the original idea. Like, who cares what Klaus Schwab's talking about? Let's focus on our 2030 and beyond, right? We know they've got this crazy plan and these crazy visions. Cool, let them have that. But the one thing that we have to recognize is that the major advantage they have over us is they're way better organized. They have think tanks and white papers and meetings 10 times a year. They put out all kinds of papers and thought experiments, Event 201. Like, these people are highly coordinated and organized and have been working for generations. This is the sort of approach I think we need to take, is like thinking generationally, being more coordinated, exercising our skills and our talents together, and collaborating and putting aside those minor differences. That's another great thing they're willing to do. Sure, on camera or in the media, it's like, oh, these politicians hate each other. You guys see the short little clip of Obama and Trump laughing it up at Jimmy Carter's funeral a few weeks ago? That to me is like a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Like, these people can put aside differences that may be real or may not be real and work towards a bigger picture, long-term goal, while we're sitting there arguing about all kinds of minute differences in forums and on Twitter and elsewhere, right? And just dividing ourselves further and further. So the People's Reset was really this effort to say, let's bring together just some of the brightest minds in 5 different themes. Our first day is called Liberate Your Mind, Body, and Soul, so it's all focused on mental, physical, and spiritual health, and that's obviously there's a lot in there. The second day is focused on permaculture and food independence, so it's all about like growing your food ideas or how to, again, get closer to your food supply, different experiments and thoughts like that. The third day is all focused on parallel networks, basically what I've been talking about today, agorism and parallel networks. That could be alternative education systems. Like this year, so as I mentioned, we just had our event this past Sunday, so we came from there to here. We had people talking about alternative education systems, talking about reclaiming your status, talking about, just a number of ways that they interpret parallel networks. The fourth day is called Empowering Technology, and that is what I was speaking to earlier with my friend Hakeem. People who are working on privacy tools, encryption, also health technology. And we also had a company this year speak called Eden Energy that was talking about how they can pretty much convert any carbon-based product into fuel. And they're doing some pretty amazing things in Africa right now. And so we try to just highlight solutions. The final day is fifth day is building free and conscious communities. And this might be people who are, hey, I have an eco-village in Mexico. I have an eco-village in California. I live here. Here's ways we organize our activist community. Here's ways we do this. We had somebody speak about home birthing, natural birthing. It's all 100% solutions focused, which is important to us. And I'm glad that there are other events that do have discussions about theories and discussions on problems and stuff. And there's a million places on the internet to do that. But when you come to the People's Reset or you watch online, because we make the entire stream available for free for everybody all around the world, and we typically get about 20 to 50,000 people tuning in from more than 25 countries and a few hundred people in person from about a dozen countries. We make all the talks available for free. So if you go to the peoplesreset.org, anybody familiar with the video platform Odyssey? You guys heard of it? If not, I encourage you to learn about it because I think it's one of the best ones out there and it's actually truly decentralized. It's not funded by Peter Thiel like Rumble and others. Odyssey, the Greater Reset, People's Reset Odyssey channel has every single talk that we've released since 2021 for free, broken down into plays of the Greater Reset 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then when we rebranded as the People's Reset UK, and as I said, we just finished our event. You can watch all 5 days of that for free, and in the coming months, I'll be posting the individual talks. We also posted the last 3 events on our Spanish Odyssey channel, because we're trying to build a worldwide international movement of people. And have you guys ever noticed that the majority of the content, let's say documentaries, books, interviews that woke us up, it's in English. Like whether you're talking about Western Europe, Australia, Canada, US, like it's mostly in English. And I find that to be kind of crazy. It doesn't mean there's other truth content in other languages, but sometimes it hasn't been translated into English or from English to other languages. And when I started to think about that, I've made a big effort not only to translate as much of my own work into other languages, but collaborating with other people. A few years ago, I announced a project with James Corbett called the Translate the Truth Project. And so it's a completely volunteer project, but myself and then different people will send in things of like Italian or German or Danish or whatever, translating books, documentaries, podcasts, interviews that, think of something that really played a major role in your awakening and the power that that could play being translated into a new language for the first time ever, and potentially waking up millions more people in that language. Like, I just think there's so much immense potential if we just get more content translated. So we put all of our stuff out in Spanish for free as well. And so really excited and proud to be a part of the creation of this movement. And it's also just another place where you can hear solutions. So if you are interested in solutions in these areas and you're thinking health, food, building new systems, if you've got kids and you're thinking of education models, other ideas, I encourage you to go to thepeoplesreset.org, look at our video, you'll see the Odyssey icon, we have a Telegram channel as well, and just go check out the playlist. There's no charge, there's nothing, you don't even have to sign up for the email list. It's totally for free and available. It's over 200 hours of solutions-focused content in these 5 areas. I think it's probably one of the largest repositories of solutions in the world, and we plan to continue to grow it. So if you're looking for ideas, you're looking to network with other people, if you got time, plan to come next January if you want, meet more like-minded people. And at this year's event, I gave a presentation called The Trials and Tribulations of Building a Parallel Community, describing the process that myself and my partner Miriam have been doing since March 2020. We're both from Texas. Miriam's family came from Mexico. Mine did 4 or 5 generations back, but we're from Texas. And we started to visit Mexico about 8 years ago for different reasons, travel, events, stuff like that. And we realized that at some point we wanted to move to Mexico. We didn't really have a plan of when or where. It was just like, yeah, it'd be nice. One day we'll maybe move down here because her grandfather was out there and we'd go visit and such. March 2020 happens. Well, actually, January 2020, February 2020, we were coming back from our annual Mexico trip. We got back to the U.S. just in time to see the toilet paper disappearing. And I was telling Miriam, I was like, I think something is going on. And I was already kind of starting to report on COVID in early 2020. And the interesting thing is the first version of my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, I wrote it in late 2019. And it's partially a warning as well as obviously as the title implies, a how-to, all about these solutions I've been sharing with you guys. But I was writing in late 2019 as a journalist who has been following facial recognition, who's been following the rise of the surveillance state. And there are many, many people way more educated and informed than me, specifically like digital attorneys and privacy activists, who have been warning for years about the dangers of the rollout of facial recognition and the combination of that with AI and with social credit scores. And so in 2019, when I was writing this book, it was, as I said, partially a warning and partially like, hey guys, maybe we need to figure out what we're gonna do here before it gets too late. And we published it January 2020. So a lot of the things I wrote in the book, I didn't predict them or anything like that, but COVID sort of sped them up. And so my book got a little outdated pretty quick. So I wrote a second update to it in 2022, including 6 new chapters that were all about everything we learned and saw during COVID and how to think about what's coming next. And as I mentioned earlier, guys, you can download the book for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. And I think we're going to sit outside this at this table afterwards and have some of them there. But as we moved to Mexico in March 2020, it just felt like it was the right move. Once they started talking about shutting down the borders, we decided, let's go visit your grandpa in Mexico and just kind of watch from a distance. For us, it ended up being the right move because Mexico was the only country in the end in the world that did not require vaccinations, quarantine requirements, or mask requirements or test requirements to enter the country at all. Some parts of the country were more aggressive than others, but as a whole, like to enter the country, you never had any of those games to play. And I heard a rumor that because the Mexican system's not so digitized that the documents are easily forged. It's just a rumor I heard. So we ended up in Mexico in March 2020 and stayed there and live there now. And so we, as I said, we do the People's Reset every January. It's become our home base. But also we knew that we wanted to create a community, an eco-village, to be like an example of all these ideas that I'm sharing with you guys. Because I'm a person that is a doer, not just a talker. I want to be able to actually, if I'm going to share an idea with you, I want to actually speak from my own experience and say, hey, this is something I tried on my own. Whether I failed or succeed is another story, but this is something I can speak directly from experience. So I don't want to talk to you guys about, let's build the new earth, build the new model, exit the matrix, if I'm not living it, right? So we've been searching for land the last few years, and we finally found the property, and actually as of 2 weeks ago, we paid it off, and now we have this property. It's 23 acres in central Mexico. The project is called the Conscious Agora. The website's theconsciousagora.com. Just a super basic website right now, but if you're interested in learning more. And it's largely based around the principles I've been sharing with you guys today. Individual liberty, self-ownership, using permaculture, and then mindfulness, trying to continue to grow as a person. We want to be off-grid. We want to, a lot of my content journalistically is going to switch very soon to documenting this process of us building our own home and working with other people. And we've got a growing community. We have 5 households now. We have like 8 families we're in the vetting process right now and getting to know. Our goal is to have a little village of 8 to 10 families, at least to start with, and to be able to host events and to be able to host like everything I just described about this exit and build philosophy. This is going to be like a testing ground for it. Like, let's have people over for workshops, for retreats, and let's build something together. Let's teach some skills. Let's do some meditation. Let's do some prayer. Like all the different elements and pieces of that puzzle. Let's be able to have a space that we can not only live there, but use it as a teaching ground for other people so that this model can spread further. I mean, the idea, the bigger picture is that the Conscious Agora would actually be a network of communities that are united by principles, not just our one community in Mexico. So it's not like I'm saying, hey, everybody needs to move to Mexico. This is where we're going to fix all the world's problems. Instead saying, what if we started focusing on building local freedom cells, mutual aid groups, hubs, hives, whatever you want to call them, on this local level, focusing on building the parallel systems of the future rather than wasting time, energy, and money into politics or violence or just being apathetic, and instead thinking of those past generations and our ancestors and thinking of the coming 7 generations and bringing that strength. Because I don't know if you guys all recognize my beautiful brothers and sisters, but you have the strength of your ancestors with you. Like, they're walking with you every single day. And you also have the strength of the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth with you. Like, that's where we come from. There's a lot of power in that. And this system wants us to believe that the only power is in the digital world, that that's the real strength, the AI, etc. Not to say that AI can't be a tool for good if it's in the right hands. But ultimately, they would like us to believe that this vessel here, it's old, it's useless, it's out of date, and it's time to upgrade for the new model, the AI transhuman technocratic model, right? We can be more than that. We can get rid of death. We can get rid of disease. These are things a lot of us might aspire to, but they want to do it in a way that also, I think, is about getting rid of your spirit, your soul, and your connection to the divine, right? So take some strength in that and recognize that you do have your ancestors at your back and at your side. And you also have the responsibility of caring for the coming 7 generations. And it's up to you whether you choose to accept that responsibility or not. But I think that's something that each of us are called to task to do. And we can create the new systems that I think will lead humanity to a better place. But it's going to take time. It's also going to take, back to the spiritual journey we discussed earlier and sort of my own struggles, you have to exit from the limiting thoughts and beliefs and the negative self-talk. I spent so many years of my life, and I didn't realize this till later, but when I was getting sucked into drugs, it was because I was depressed. I was confused. I was hurt from a lot of things that happened to me when I was a kid, visiting my father in prison. And it took me to get to an adult to start seeing this clear chain of events that led me to being a sad, depressed teenager who thought drinking as much beer as possible would make me feel better, and then taking as many shots as possible, and then popping as many pills, and then before I know it, I was locked up in prison. It took a while to be able to look back and see that progression and see, wow, the roots of all this is this trauma that I was not able to or ready to deal with, right? And so exit and build, it is the physical space, education models, financial systems, food systems, et cetera, but it's also in here and it's in here, right? If we do not exit from those false belief systems, which I think have been hoisted upon us in many ways by pop culture, by programming, by education models, et cetera, and reclaim our own power mentally, physically, spiritually, then it doesn't matter what we do in the physical world. Even if we do all these wonderful physical things, if we don't exit from those systems and create better systems in here, then it won't matter in the physical world, and vice versa. If we completely ignore the physical world but only do the internal, spiritual, and heart-based work, but ignore the physical, I do think that will be problematic as well. That's why, as I started with earlier, I talk about the conscious resistance, or what I often call holistic activism, and bringing these worlds together. That, I think, is really the key, is focusing on our inner journey, focusing on the physical world, doing what we can to become free of those systems, to live and model better behavior for the coming generations, and to honor our ancestors as we build these alternative systems. I don't think it will be easy. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. But I do know that this is probably, in my view, one of the most important things that we can do as a species. So I thank you guys for your time. I have 2 last things to share here. I always end my talks with a positive affirmation. I'm going to share that in just a second. If you feel inclined, if you want to repeat after me, you can. There's no pressure here. It's all voluntary. But I'll just share real quickly that this is something that came to me when I was locked up. I truly was just a scared. I thought I knew something, and all of a sudden, I'm locked up at 21 years old. I'm like, holy shit, I don't know anything about life. What's going on here? And I had to face a lot of fears and doubts. And also, as I was discovering meditation, I remember just I'm in my bunk, and there's, prisons and jails are just filled with fear. Like, I mean, it comes out as anger and like machismo and everybody's so tough and all this. It's all fear. It's all fear at the end of the day. But everybody's got to put on a mask, right? So I'm just sitting there on my bed, just like trying to, all right, let me just meditate in here. What the fuck is that guy doing over there? You know, I'm hearing all these whispers and all this sort of stuff. And in that space, just having to really like, it's not about them. Like, I need to figure out why I'm here, you know, and just, it was a difficult time, and I use this affirmation as a way to help me through those times. So if you feel inclined, if this resonates with you, please feel free to repeat after me. I am powerful.
I am powerful.
I am beautiful.
I am beautiful.
I am free.
I am free.
Awesome. All right. Let's hit that song, brother. All right, this is my last thing, guys. Then I'm going to go. I think I got a couple minutes for questions, and I'll be sitting outside. You can find my work at theconsciousresistance.com, thepyramidofpower.net, freedomcells.org, thepeoplesreset.org, theconsciousagora.com.
You have 10 minutes.
Cool. And then we're going to do a song. My music is at 33ishere.com. So let's play. This was called Reflections, guys. Check this out.
We have to reestablish our identity. We have to understand who we are and where we fit in the natural order of the world. The people who have created this system and they perpetuate this system, they are out of balance. They have made us out of balance.
I woke up this morning feeling I had something to say. I got doubts in my mind. It's time to let them fly away. It's time to unlearn poison and heal broken hearts. Go back to the end. It's time for a fresh start. This is the place we can atone for our sins. This is the place where our hero's journey begins. A space between love and hate where there's no escape from our fate. Rather than be irate, let's create, let's build. The better world we know is possible. I've got no fear cause I can overcome any obstacle. I stare all my demons in the face, I'll show you what's possible. I send love from my heart, I'm intuitive, not illogical. It's just that lately I've been searching for deeper meaning. I'm sick of drugs, booze, mindless sex, and criminal scheming. Feels like I should have more at this point in time. I'm talking knowledge, not money, I'm trying to feed my mind.
See, we are power.
We are power.
They deal in violence and repression. We are power. They tell us, they want us to believe that we are powerless.
I hope you hear these words from my mind, from my heart to your ears. We got one life. Let's do something with it. Open up all three of my eyes and fly to the heavens. During my meditation, I see my life in chapters of 7. I connect to my inner child to heal my wounds. I recall those I've lost to dope, gone too soon. My life flashes before me, a collage of joy and pain. I recall the highs, the lows, I swear I'm going insane. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this journey. Spent too much time worried about things that don't concern me. No more time wasted, not chasing my dreams. I wake up every day knowing this world ain't what it seems. We gotta find our own path, we gotta make our own meaning. Cause we can't be sure, we might be dreaming. All I know is, when I look in your eyes, I see myself. I'm just a reflection of your impression of my higher self. Could it be that our whole reason for being, our existence, is a lesson to teach us over and over until we get this? You are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Shake off your chains, you were blind, but now you see. Grandfather, help us remember where we come from. Grandmother, walk with us until the battle is won. Thank you guys so much. I encourage you guys to hear these words right here. This is Native activist John Trudell. He died in 2015. Let his words hit your heart.
We are a natural part of the earth. We are an extension of that natural energy which is spirit and which is power. That is natural power. And just as it takes millions and billions of elements to make a blizzard to happen, or to make the earthquake, to make the earth to move, then it's going to take millions and billions of us. We are power. We have that power.
You are powerful, you are beautiful, you are free. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time. I think I got 5 minutes. I'll take a question or so, and then if anybody wants to come chill at the table, I've got books and shirts out there. And yes, ma'am.
Is there an equivalent to the above phone for an Apple phone, iPhone?
So you may have noticed that. Do I need to repeat the question? Should I repeat that?
She's bringing you.
Okay, there's a mic.
Yeah, I was asking if there is an equivalent to the above phone for an Apple
For
or
an
an
Apple?
iPhone.
Okay, so one thing you guys, the answer is no. And one thing you guys may notice with, because because it's starting to be a trend of privacy phones, and the only one I can personally speak for is above phone, just to make that clear. There definitely are a lot of scams out there, and there's some shady people involved in alleged privacy phones, namely Eric Prince, who's a former Blackwater military contractor. If you see any truth pages promoting that, I would be very wary of that. But the reason that most of them are based on Android is because Apple is like a totally locked down, controlled system. Like they basically have it secured to the point you can't crack it. And the way that you can crack an Android and basically do Google it and remove all that and kind of start over, there's no equivalent at the moment for Apple. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. She's got a mic.
I got the mic. I have two comments.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to being a felon, I think the question is, are you convicted or unconvicted felon? Because who at this point isn't?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So according to them, I am a convicted felon. This is 2005, so it'll be 20 years in November this year since I was locked up. I just turned 40 a couple of months ago. So it's kind of crazy, but you're correct. The reality is that increasingly everything you want to do is going to be illegal.
Everything is illegal.
Yeah.
And then we all get the opportunity to ask ourselves, at what point is that line crossed where we'd be willing to give our lives for freedom? And when I ask myself, when was that line crossed? For me personally, that line was crossed before I was ever born.
Can I say something to you on that? Just a response real quick. I do write about that in How to Opt Out the Technocratic State. I say something along the lines of, at the end of the day, if you want to stay free, you're going to have to break the law. And I'm not here just for all legal reasons. I'm not advocating breaking any laws. What I mean by that is that, as you were kind of pointing out, and as we saw during COVID, if it becomes illegal to be a free person, then you either become illegal or you submit. And I think that's definitely the direction things are headed in. So yes, being able to stand on principles, even in the face of all obstacles, and standing your truth is going to become increasingly important. Any other questions?
Well, first, you're a force of nature.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Right? Isn't it? And so thank you for the share. Very moving, very important for me. I really appreciate it. How do you square, and probably it's a longer conversation, but the mania and the craziness of Musk and Trump and the decentralization of that they're trying to do with currency, with the idealism of going after our own currency? You know what I'm saying?
Like you're saying,
how are you dealing with personally the fact that clearly they're looking to do their own shit with Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And there's some great stuff on us dealing with our own currency.
Sure.
So how do you reckon those two?
So I don't trust Elon Musk to any degree at all. And if anybody wants to go to the consciousresistance.com and search Elon Musk, you'll see a really awesome panel that myself, Whitney Webb, James Corbett, Jason Burmis, a few others did about 2 years ago, talking about why, if that's a new topic to you. And actually, before I came down here, I'm working on an article right now called "Here's Every Peter Thiel Acolyte in Trump's Second Administration." So there's a lot, right? So Bitcoin has been hijacked. I've been using Bitcoin since 2012. I've been in the space early for the reasons I share with you guys. I don't use banks. I don't talk to certain agencies. So crypto has allowed me to transact and receive money without using a bank, without talking to governments. But it is true that over time, the sort of guiding vision of it as a free money system, it's going to end the Fed, et cetera, has largely changed. Most people who've come in since about 2017 are mainly focused on, people say in the crypto community, NGU, number go up. They just want the number to go up higher. They don't care that, hey, this could actually avoid the bank government. In fact, they probably have never actually held their own crypto. They buy it through PayPal or their bank or stock or something like that, right? So the sort of guiding vision of it as this money that could free the people seems to have mostly been lost. There's still the crypto anarchists out there in space, but by and large, it has been co-opted. And a great book on this is Roger Ver's book, Hijacking Bitcoin. And he actually right now is facing charges from the federal government. But anyways, yeah, so I don't, just to say that I don't trust what they're doing. I don't see what they're doing in the long term as going to be beneficial. And in fact, myself and Whitney have written about that if it doesn't come, it probably won't come in the form of Bitcoin. We're seeing the hijacking, co-opting of it, but more than likely we're going to see stable coins, which Howard Lutnick, who is Trump's Commerce Secretary, he's also the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, who had a lot of offices on 9/11 and the Twin Towers. He, and also was a neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein. Him and others are involved in Rumble. They're also involved in the Bitcoin community. They're going all in, right? So they're definitely trying to rally it up, and it seems like they're also invested in Tether, USDC, USDT, stuff like that. So it seems like they're going to try to use stable coins as a way to convince people that we have now free money. We got past the Fed, but in effect, it won't be a CBDC because Trump's going to ban that. but it'll be the same thing.
Right.
It'll be surveyable money that can be traced, but it won't be a CBDC, so we won and everything's great, right? But yeah, I'm happy to continue that conversation. All right, guys, thank you so much for my time and appreciate you. I'll be sitting outside.